Good evening, friends. On behalf of AMA, it's a pleasure to welcome you all on this very interesting topic, a panel discussion about the aviation industry, especially the emerging opportunities. When you talk of aviation industry, you immediately talk about aircraft and airports, but it's much beyond that, as we'll be listening to the experts. Even in our old Indian scriptures, we had the Pushpak Viman, and then of course at the beginning of the 20th century when the Wright brothers finally flew an aircraft, and then the rest is history. When we talk about aircraft, you have military aircrafts, you have civil aircrafts for commercial use, private jets and whatnot. But then the aviation industry is much more than that. You talk of the airports and so many allied services. Then you have the aircraft manufacture and the components, avionics, air traffic control and all that. But anyway, I leave all that to the experts today. And we have distinguished speakers from the aviation industry. Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, who put all this together. He's director of Blu-ray Aviation and also the managing director of Hester Biosciences, a very well-known company, one of the biggest in Asia for animal vaccines. Then we have Captain AjayChauhn, who is the director of the Civil Aviation Department, the government of Gujarat. And we have finally Mr. Arpitshah, a senior trainer with Indigo Airlines. So all these sectors are represented. And the moderator today will be Mr. Alpesh Parikh, who is a member of our governing board and also the managing director of Gulmore Greens Golf and Country Club. I'm sure it will be very interesting and a great take home. So without taking much of your time, I'll request Alpesh Bhai to carry on with the proceedings. And I welcome all the distinguished speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Divyesh Bhai, for taking this up. I'm going to, while Divyesh Bhai has already introduced the speakers very briefly, I'm going to dig a little bit more into them so that you actually get to know the overall background under which we're going to be taking up today's evening, because it's so important to know the people sitting on the stage to understand what all could be delivered from them. So I'm going to start first with Rajiv Bhai. Rajiv Gandhi is the first generation entrepreneur. He's the founder and CEO and managing director of Hester Bioscience Limited. This is a company which makes vaccines not only for animals, but very recently he was also instrumental in helping us during the COVID time. So thank you, Rajiv Bhai, for taking that assignment as well. Rajiv Bhai is also a very passionate aviation lover. So he runs this company because per se he himself is someone who is so deeply passionate about aviation, and his company is called Blu-ray Aviation. That's what he operates in India, right here with his office here in Ahmedabad. Recently, Rajiv Bhai acquired a company called Aerotrans Services Private Limited, which has a helicopter charter service company, and it parks its helicopters at Ahmedabad airport. So if any one of you is looking forward for flying a chopper, taking a joyride, then Ahmedabad airport is close by, or you could obviously go to Mehsana. So Rajiv Bhai, welcome. I would like to present a rose to you. The next two are the big wigs, the two big people sitting there. I'll start with first with Captain Ajay and then move on to Captain Arpit. Captain AjayChauhn is working as Director Civil Aviation Gujarat and Gutsel. He is leading various path-breaking initiatives pertaining to infrastructure development, sector regulation, state-level policy, as well as improving operational safety in the aviation sector in the state. Captain and Squadron Leader AjayChauhn's area of expertise includes aviation infrastructure development, public-private participation, regulatory compliances, policy formulation, implementation and compliance of the safety, emergency response planning. That's something which is very important in case of an emergency. How do you take it up? How do you respond? That's what falls under him. And also the operation and maintenance. In the recent past, he was instrumental in formulating and successfully implementing the country's first state-level regional connectivity scheme. That's not all. You see a very, very serious man sitting here, but I'm told that he's actually not. He's somebody who is the highest mastikor around here. So Ajay, you'll have to smile more for people to understand that you're not the serious good cell leadership team player. He's also was on an active duty with two presidents of India, with President K.R. Narayan and with our President Abdul Kalam sir. He was actively involved in that duty as well. So that's something great up your sleeve and some great experience I'm sure you possess, having worked so closely with the presidents of India. Welcome to this thing. I'd like to welcome you also with a rose. And finally, I'd like to welcome Captain Arpitshah. Captain Arpit started his journey with pursuing private pilot license. Now, private pilot license, please remember this word because we will be touching this word quite often through tonight. And then got selected by the IGRUA for his commercial pilot license. Now, that's also a word we'll be touching quite often for people who are too new to the aviation industry. So he was then selected at IGRUA for his commercial pilot license training. During his training, he got appointed as a course captain of the batch and eventually as academy captain on the basis of merit and got awarded with Tata Scholarship on merit basis. He then went on to become the first officer with Alliance Air on ATR 42 family aircraft and then eventually joined Deccan Air where he got upgraded on Airbus as a FO, that's a flying officer, and he got command in 2008, after which he flew up for Kingfisher Airline as captain. Again, I just ran through it, but for people again who are new to the aviation jargons, commander means that he is then the sole guy who takes care of our lives when we are up in the air. So that's what he commands the flight. He's the one who can decide who's going to fly on his aircraft or whom he can just ask to walk out if he's not comfortable to have them on board. He joined Indigo in 2011 and worked for 7 years as management pilot heading Ahmedabad pilots. He's currently working as designated examiner on A320 family there, and he's also based out of Ahmedabad. So welcome, Captain Arpit. It's great to have you here with us. Today we'll be, as the topic says, we're talking about aviation industry, and we're trying to figure out what's actually happening in this industry and what are the opportunities lying ahead, and is this industry on a path-breaking point in time where things could actually go on a very, very beautiful tangent from this point onwards. And that's what we'll be discussing with these three panelists who are here with us today. For the panelists, I would be putting in some of my thoughts, and you could probably pick up and tell us about more in detail so that all of us out here could learn from those things and also enlighten us on how we could fall more and more in love with flying. Basically, as I assume all of us love to fly. Who likes to anymore travel by train? We all want to fly up in the air and enjoy those beautiful aircrafts, and if not flying the commercial airline, probably take a joyride or fly just from here to Sardar Sarovar on the smaller aircrafts. But something we all are so getting used to and making it as part and parcel of our life. And that brings one to a point that there is always a confusion between divisions of businesses among aviation industry. I mean, how do you tell or understand, like, what's a military aviation, or what's a general aviation, or what's a civil aviation? For us, I think most of us, we only understand one word, that's aviation. But you people come up and tell us a lot of different things, like there is something called general aviation, and they say, no, there's civil aviation. We're two different things, you know, we're like brother sisters. But then we have a step brother who's the military aviation. So Rajiv, could you tell us more, since you run a company actually, could you tell us about how are these aviations different and what does it actually mean?
So, good evening, everybody. Yes, there is a lot of confusion in the branches of aviation. All of us are most of the time exposed to civil aviation. We see in the news Ministry of Civil Aviation, we talk about aviation means Indigo or Spice Jet or something of that sort. But in reality, there is much more than just civil aviation, the big jet aircrafts, the big Airbus and the Boeing. I mean, everybody knows Airbus and Boeing because they are the two big manufacturers of the big aircraft. There is much more in aviation than the aircrafts that we see in which we fly commercially from here to maybe Delhi or Udaipur or wherever it is. In fact, interestingly, in the US, 10 to 15% of the aircrafts are in civil aviation and 85 to 90% of the aircrafts are in general aviation. So that's something, so we are not even aware of that 85%. So now let me come to aviation. I would put aviation as three different divisions in aviation. One is the military aviation, the defense aviation, wherein the Army, Navy, Air Force, the defense, they have their own aviation wing. Would not really want to get much onto in that because that's something which does not impact us and neither do I have much information on them. Then is the civil aviation, which all of us have the most exposure to, wherein we see these aircrafts. And this civil aviation is that part of aviation which is called commercial flying, buying a ticket and going from point A to point B. That's civil aviation. Now there is the third bifurcation in aviation, and that is general aviation. This is a legal dictionary or a defined term, general aviation. So what does general aviation mean? General aviation is the widest range out of all the aviation out of the three, and it includes many things right from flying training, from the time a pilot actually learns flying, up to small jet aircrafts, hobby flying. You see these, you take these, ambulance, that is the air ambulance service, leisure flying, you do the skydiving, you do the tow, sometimes you see banners towing behind aircrafts, all the small aircrafts which are used commercially for various purposes, all are part of general aviation and they are not part of civil aviation. So this is broadly the difference between general aviation and civil aviation, and in terms of aircraft, as I said, general aviation is much bigger.
So Rajiv bhai, tell us, you mentioned that 70% in US is general aviation, about
85.
85. Yes. So what's that ratio here in India? What sort of ratio we're talking here for us?
In India, I had got some statistics from the DGCA website, and I can just give you that figure. While in US it is 85 to 90 to 10 worldwide, in India, the general aviation aircrafts contribute around 45% as against 85 to 90 in the world, and the civil aviation aircrafts in India are 55. India is one of the only countries where the big jet, the Airbus and the Boeings are more than the smaller aircrafts.
All right. So that sort of makes us wonder, how many airports, Captain Ajay, would we have for such general aviation? I assume that the general aviation generally are not always encouraged to get onto the ATC airports. They prefer to fly out of those private smaller airports or the hobby flying spaces. So does India have the capacity for this 45%, or are we under, over?
So with regards to the infrastructure in the country, let us say what we've been hearing in the conferences, prior to independence, if there were, prior to 10 years back, there were about 70 airports. Today we are running into about 120, 140 airports, which are airports which could be used by general aviation. These are airports which are coming with Airport Authority of India, which is an organization which runs the airports by, licensing them, getting them their instrumentations and other kind of procedures, air traffic procedures and all. Each state prior to independent had a lot of airstrips, you know, all the kings and all, they had their own airstrips. These airstrips are still in use. These airstrips do not need licenses. These airstrips can be used for general aviation purposes. Like in our state, if you say, we have about 19 airports if we count Daman and Diu together. Ours is one of the highest operational airports in the country.
So all 19 are operational airports.
18 are operational out of this. Other states might have more airstrips, but they do not have an operational airport. They might have 3, 4, like, you know, when if you go to Maharashtra, they won't have as much as we have. But we also have airstrips. You know, we have about 5 to 7 different airstrips which are there, you know, which have been belonging, let's say Mandvi, Amreli, you know, means we have Mehsana. We also have some airstrips coming up. These will be used for general aviation. So if we go all together in the country, we might have about 400 such airstrips, you know, which could be used. So we have enough infrastructure available.
Oh, that's great that India is right there having these. It's just that we are underutilizing this because we do not probably have, as Rajiv mentioned, that we still have in general aviation only 45% of the total aircrafts. And
like what Rajiv Bhai said, that, you know, means it is the only country which has more Airbuses than the general aviation aircraft. Once you start getting this aircraft, this airfields will start getting activated. It is, you know, that...
So government of India, just to take it a little bit more deeper into it, is the only authority, just for all of us to know for sure, like only government of India can approve a airstrip and do it? Or is there a possibility that tomorrow somebody who has a parcel of land can just make a private strip, set up a tower and say, this is where I'm going to park my planes and take off from here only? Is that something government allows, or that's not?
The government of India, you know, has a policy by which the airstrips are made. In those policies, there are public airstrips, there are private category airstrips. So any businessman or any business house or anybody who has land, like what you said, could create their own airstrips. There is no restriction. Like if we are living in this part of the country, but if you go to the northeast part of the country, the tea gardens have their own airstrips. They have their own airplanes. So they are doing that general aviation on their own there. Here we are not doing it, you know, because we have good road connectivities. If the road connectivity is good, you know, the airstrips will take time to come up till we get congested, or, you know, you become very safety conscious, because flying is a very safe environment. So when you start becoming safety conscious, you know, people, so we will also be getting those airstrips.
Thanks. I mean, when we think about airstrips and flying and all, I think the question that comes to my mind immediately is, how safe are we? I mean, how well trained are the pilots? So Captain Arpit, you've been running this for Indigo now from a very long time. How important is the pilot training, and what all actually gets into it for us to feel safe being up in that aircraft?
Okay. So, Alpesh bhai, you know, it's very important because there are, we have so many courses available across the streams and all. But this particular, to become a pilot, it's a skill-based. So it is not something which you can acquire overnight. Or it's not something that you mug up few chapters and now you are ready to fly. This is purely you have to have a proper skill, and that's the reason that you have the life in your hand. So that's where the training institute or training schools comes into picture, where if, you know, today or tomorrow, if somebody wants to pursue a career in IIT, why we take names of IIT, IIM, something like that, big names? Because they have a reputation that if somebody has passed out from there, then definitely quality is not compromised. Same way, we are looking forward to establish schools, clubs, organization which gives us such quality where it is definitely skill-based. So it is a name of organization, like we have Blu-rays along with their instructors. So it goes hand in hand. So if you have such organizations where they focus more on skill-based training and equally good instructors, so that becomes very relevant and important, that we need such organizations so that we can cater for good training.
So training is very important, as you say. And to fly an aircraft, most of us will always think that flying an aircraft is like flying an Airbus or a Boeing or a big plane. So is it that if I want to learn to fly, I have to become a commercial pilot? Or is there an option where I don't have to be a commercial pilot? Like what Rajiv bhai just mentioned, that there's general aviation and you can fly for you know, as just as a sport. So what's the way? I mean, what is it generally?
So basically, the minimum requirement we have is 12 science we need, in which we minimum required is physics and maths. So let's say, for example, somebody says, I have only commerce. So no problem. You can go to a private institute where you can clear your maths, physics, and you can appear. That is the minimum requirement. Now, once you have this subject 12 standard cleared, then you can go to any school, colleges, or organizations where they run this kind of institute where they teach flying. It's a theory as well as practical. So there are certain number of hours you have to clear along with certain numbers of papers you have to regulatory requirement. Once you have that, you have PPL. Then there is a private pilot license. Now I'm coming back to questions where if I want to fly commercially, for example, if you want to fly for an airline or for a general aviation for remuneration, then you require a commercial pilot license. But, for example, I have a Boeing 747 or for that matter Airbus 380, which is the largest aircraft, but I own them and I am not using them for remuneration. I just don't require commercial pilot license. I just required a private pilot license to fly my own aircraft.
So what you're saying is like, I run a taxi company, so I need a taxi badge, like a normal for a layman to understand. But I have my private car. So I just need a private car license to drive my own private cars.
Exactly. So need not necessarily that only you want to own that. Let's say you are a hobby flyer. That also amounts to that. You just fly, get your PPL, and then you start flying wherever you are wants to fly. Go to a flying school. You hire aircraft, and you can start flying along with that. Now, if you want to fly for remuneration, then you need to have commercial pilot license. Once you have the commercial pilot license, then the aviation is open. Now, whether it is a general aviation or civil aviation, that depends on the availability of job prospects. So in general aviation, basically the companies which own the aircraft and they charter the services, they use their aircraft for cargo services, their air ambulances for leisure flying or charter flying. You can join them in general aviation. Parallelly, if there is a requirement in any airline industries, you can join any airlines which are opening up. You can join as a first officers and then you can build up your career along.
That's quite interesting. And to know more about it, is there enough job opportunities, Captain Ajay? I mean, is there where there is a demand on? I mean, this question is open to, in fact, all three of you. Are there enough opportunities, first and foremost? Because today one of us decided we're impressed and we thought, okay, we want to learn how to fly. And then when we start learning at a young age, at 10th, 12th standard, and we're up there flying, what happens next? Now I have invested my time, energy in learning how to fly. Do I have an opportunity to make it a breadwinner for me, or I have to stick only to being just be a person who's flying in a club and just for enjoyment?
See, with the aviation market opening up and expanding quite fast now in India, the opportunities are going to come. There are presently enough opportunities for people who are flying to get into a job. And it is always kind of a graph, We are on an upward trend now, it is going up, and, at times there is a saturation, it comes down. But for now, for at least for a period of another few more years, maybe 10 years or so, because we are going to become the third largest market in aviation. So we are presently probably having 800 planes. We will be going to maybe 2,500 planes, and if it is in airlines, like I don't know how much airline planes are there, but like, if 800, around 400, like he said 55%, so 45%. 400 plane is probably we are having about, each airlines must be having, like Jet Airways had about 800 pilots with 100 planes. So let us say one plane about 80 pilots, or that kind of ratio with 2,000 plane is going to be, there's a lot of opportunity, but he would be able to answer more on that.
I agree with Captain Ajay. There is a tremendous opportunity. So we talk about airlines only. General aviation, so definitely, because the coming years are where it's all time saving. So when I'm talking about airline industries, there are confirmed orders of more than around 900 aircrafts in totality. So we have already taken delivery of more than 300 plus aircrafts flying right now. Delivery of 500 aircrafts. More 600 aircrafts are yet to come. We have Vistara, which have placed order. We have Akasha Air, which has 70 aircrafts for Boeing. Then we have SpiceJet, who is now going to go for Airbus as well. Air India is expanding. They are getting new 777s, and they are getting Airbus 350 as well. So in totality, I would say, next couple of years are going to be very busy. But yes, at the same time, I'm coming back to that. Now, when opportunities are there, but they never compromise on the quality. So that's where our basic job as a whether to train a quality pilot rather than quantity. That's a we are going to definitely need more than 5,000 pilots in coming years. If we already have those pilots now, are they, they're qualified or they're competent enough to be inducted in any airlines? So that is assured by a proper training and skill-based institute.
So basically what you're trying to tell all of us here is that we have a very robust and strong training institutes already existing in our country, and especially in Gujarat as we speak about, and overall for every airline, for commercially speaking, and for you as Gujarat, we have strong base where we're not compromising on quality while we are expanding leaps and bounds as far as quantity is concerned in terms of new aircrafts coming, and which means a lot of new opportunity for people who possess that skill. It's only that it's not been discovered, and they need to be trained, and those skills need to be sharpened enough, and there is an opportunity. Now, are all opportunities just limited to flying, or does aviation industry has a larger picture, Rajiv bhai? Does aviation mean only, anyone who aspires? Does it mean that I have to be a pilot, or there is many peripheral jobs associated with aviation industry where I could be a pilot, but I just need to not always be flying, but there are other jobs also which I could be engaged in, or perhaps in terms of maintenance or in terms of operations. So what are those?
There is a lot that goes around one aircraft or an airline company. It's not just the pilot. If the perception is that pilot, aircraft, and here you are with an airline. But that's, I think there are more ground staff people than pilots. Pilots could be per big aircraft, 5, 6, 7, 8. Maximum 8, while there is ground staff, there is a maintenance staff, there is an operations staff. There are innumerable opportunities, and today in India, trust me, each of these avenues require people. Right now, while the industry is growing, we are at a stage in India where the industry is growing, but there is no much information given to the people who want to come in this industry. So once that happens, then all these avenues, for example, coming back to the question, ground handling, each plane, whenever we board any of these Indigo or Vistara, you see innumerable people as ground staff. Now, they may be in uniforms and all, but trust me, all are absolutely qualified. They would be engineers. They would be the people who are maintaining the aircraft, on whose safety the pilot first says yes, and we ourselves are then willing to fly. So one is the ground staff, one is the cabin crew, the ticketing staff, the administrative staff. Today, before coming here, we were talking with Captain Arpit, and he mentioned that even a 1 minute delay takeoff or even closing the door in an Indigo in an aircraft, the matter reaches the highest authority, and there is a discussion that why did it get delayed by 1 minute. Some time ago, on WhatsApp, there are so many WhatsApps and all going on. Some of these companies, how did they cut cost? By reducing one small portion in a catering, they were able to reduce millions of dollars per year. So again, catering. So all these are they are all going to grow as much as what the pilots are going to grow, as much as the aircraft's going to grow. So 8 are only the pilots, but there would be another 20 or 30 people behind each aircraft that would be needed to actually make that aircraft fly.
Rajiv, you opened your remarks saying that there are so many opportunities there, but people just don't know about it. Could you share to the august audience some of these opportunities, or what was your game plan when you decided to form a Blu-ray Aviation? What made you go? Was there enough economics involved to it, as well as a businessman, as a business owner who's running anyway such a large company on the sidelines, and from running a company which is pharmaceutical to getting into aviation, it cannot just be limited to passion. I'm sure there were economic figures also involved. And with that, can you also share with us the type of aircrafts you possess at present? What are your future goals? How do you see the general aviation moving from this point onwards? So not just as your own company, but overall being a market player, what are your thought processes? Where do you see this moving forward from here?
Okay. So, Blu-ray Aviation is a company that started off as a flying training organization. We wanted to look, a few of our friends wanted to learn flying, but we were not able to get to any school where we would be able to learn flying. And I visited innumerable schools, and this was around 7 years ago. I'm just 6 or 7 years in this industry. On one side, there was a shortage of pilots, and all the schools that we visited were making losses. So I thought, how can you be making losses in an industry where the product is in shortage? So either the information is wrong that there is a shortage of pilots, or the schools are not running well. Going deeper into it, because at that time, things have now eased out more. Government regulations, very few people in the industry, financial issues, all these, all combined kept these flying schools in a very mediocre level in terms of their financial health. So I thought, let's take this as a risk and let's venture into it. So that is how we acquired Blu-ray Aviation, a defunct flying school out of Ahmedabad in Maharashtra, uprooted the school, and thanks to Captain AjayChauhn and Gudsel and government of Gujarat, they allotted place to us at Mehsana airstrip, and that is where we got the school. And in 3 years' time, a loss-making, a defunct school was converted into a profit-making entity. So what I am trying to say is, I'm not trying to stress on the profit or on the functioning of Blu-ray. There is an opportunity. And why did we make profit? Because there were pilots who wanted to, students who wanted to join and become pilots. And these pilots today, they have got jobs at all places, in all the airlines, in small jet aircrafts, etc. So coming to this, that becoming a pilot, there are good job opportunities. There are many job opportunities with the Indigos and the Vistaras of the world. But even if you come to the smaller jet aircrafts, the turboprop aircrafts, all of these types of aircraft, today in India, there is a shortage of pilots. Today, for example, we in Aerotrans, we have a Citation jet, and we have this Bell 407 helicopter. If our pilot is on leave, we have to ground the aircraft because we are not able to get another pilot to fly that aircraft for that day. Okay, but the connectivity between becoming a pilot and getting a job, that is a link which is missing in this country. We are progressing towards this, but trust me, if anybody becomes a pilot today, and really, we are even trying to create a situation, because we are ourselves in a very unique position, probably the only entity in aviation in the country where we have a flying school, we have a maintenance agency, we have a air charter services, and now of course a drone training institute. So we ourselves are trying to get our own pilots, join our own air charter flying, and then from there we encourage them to take bigger aircrafts. In fact, we tell them that be with us for 1 or 2 years, look at better opportunities and take up a bigger aircraft to fly to. So we are trying to do this, and trust me, I think our people who have passed out, they are able to see this and they are able to get it. Not that we have even confirmed a job, but having done this, they are able to get jobs and take it further.
So you also gave a very important clue, I think, to the audience, other than this, is that if you want to not be in aviation, but if you want to be in HR, you can have a vertical which is for getting people who are wanting to be pilots and joining firms. So there's one missing link which is becoming a pilot and then finding a job, and somebody could even look at that as an opportunity, as a vertical in a company.
Absolutely.
But Captain Ajay, this brings me to you, is that you helped Blu-ray, a defunct company from Maharashtra, to come here. And how many more companies has Gujarat been instrumental? Because you're sort of a voice for Gujarat, where we keep hearing that Gujarat has always been the front runner. You also started your opening remarks by saying that Gujarat had more number of airports compared to most of the other developed states in India. And that was something which you did with one company. And how many more such companies have happened or are still in the pipeline, and you're trying to support them?
So with regards to, your question is with regards to flying school. Presently we have 2 flying schools in our state. One is in Baroda and one is in Mehsana. Blu-ray Aviation in Mehsana is on a state government airfield. We, as a state, we initiated this, developing the state government airfields which were actually either encroached or not in use. We have made these 3 airstrips and we are wanting to bring new flying schools there. We already are working with one flying school which is going to come up in Amreli. We already have a tender open for another flying school in, 2 flying school in Amreli, and probably one in Mandvi subsequently. So we might have about 5 flying schools in this state, which is quite good enough for the capacity of the state and for, generating the students' interest here. What is to be seen is that, it's not about the airfoil. Like what Rajiv ji said, it is about the quality of the flying school. State can provide you an airstrip. State can give you some benefits of being there. We can give you waiver in taxes, or we can give you some kind of things. But it is how you run that flying school. So what we are also doing is we are also looking very closely at people who can actually bring quality schools to our state. Just having flying school is not what we want. Apart from this, even the Airport Authority of India, which is Government of India, has now come out with a policy in which they have reduced a lot of charges. Earlier, it used to be very expensive to run flying school on a, on an Airport Authority airport, because Surat had a flying school which had to wind up. Baroda flying school was not doing well because there are so many charges. Now, Airport Authority has brought down the charges way low. So there's another flying school which will come through Government of India in Bhavnagar. So we'll have enough flying school in our state.
That's very promising to know that there are more opportunities for flying school to keep happening, and that means that we will have more pilots being trained locally. But that also brings us to a point that we keep hearing so many people who actually travel abroad to get their certification done, rather than doing it back home in our own backyard. So why is this needed? As a layman, I just would want to know that why can't I have an IIM in my own backyard, and why do I have to go to a Purdue or Georgia Tech somewhere which is not in India?
So I'll tell you, there are like few factors actually which govern this. One is the regulations. The regulation actually allows you the amount of flying you do, the quality of flying, the quality of training you're supposed to get. It also decides what kind of instructors are going to be there, what will be their qualification, and this instructor needs to be qualified. Like in our country, there is extreme shortage, so people who become instructor will jump on and go to airlines. Whereas if you go internationally, the airlines per se do not take very junior people, because there are enough pilots available, so they would want them to gain experience as an instructor. So they work there, so they work more hours, they work to gain their hours. So you get to fly a lot there. A student gets to fly a lot there, so he can do things very fast. In India, our airspace is also not very friendly. Like in abroad, the airspace is very friendly, so they can do their flying very fast there. And apart from that, maybe Rajiv ji would like to add something to that. Why people go abroad?
People do go abroad, and I'll even let Captain Arpit, because in training pilots at Indigo you might be getting, so I would want you to just continue to what I say. What happens is that the perception that I go to USA, it is always better, point number 1. Partly the perception is also true, because the aviation industry is so evolved in the United States that it gives you a lot of additional exposure than what one you would get over here. But having said that, now we are progressing in India, more flying schools are coming in India. I personally feel that the number of students as a percentage, I think 50% years ago would be going abroad, or more than 50%, but now that percentage is going down on a year-on-year basis. I do not have the statistics, if at all Captain Arpit has those, but now the schools in India are improving because I mean, the fact is that one can go abroad and now people do see job opportunities over here. So it is improving now for sure.
Since you run a training school, is the cost same or is it more expensive to learn outside?
The cost would be a little higher in the United States, but we are not looking at many other hidden costs, the ticket cost to go from here to there. You know, the cost of adjusting oneself socially to the United States or Australia, wherever you go. It's very easily said and done that in India, I mean, I can even give the amount. It costs around 30 to 32 lakhs to become a commercial pilot over here. If you go to the United States, it will cost you around 35 lakhs, but that is just the basic fees. On that, staying, traveling, coming back, going.
International calls,
yes,
STD, data.
Yeah, even let's say nowadays you get free, but the cost of adjusting socially for a year in the United States, I mean, it's a tremendous cost, it's a tremendous pressure. And now the training is also improving in India. So I think this drain is reducing. I'll just have Captain Arpit just expand.
So I agree with Captain Ajay and Captain Rajiv in terms of, you know, availability. So let's go few years back. There were infrastructure was a major issue in India, and I would just give you a comparison that, you know, any one state in US had more training aircraft than the entire Indian flying school. So for example, you know, if you go to Texas, there are some 500 training aircraft, and where if you compare in back 20 years back, we had hardly 100 aircraft all combined.
Today it's 350, so it's
right, exactly. So still we are very far behind in terms of infrastructure. So now that brings us to availability of the aircraft. Now here, you know, amount of money is fixed. So let's say if I want to invest 35 lakh, for me to do a flying in India, maybe then used to take 1.5 minimum to 2 years, 2.5 years, depending upon the weather, availability of instructors and all. Now those things are improving here. As Captain Rajiv said, they have a procedure where if you pass out from Blu-ray, you can join as an instructor. Okay, then you can gain experience. Now, when you are joining in any airline, it definitely helps if you have more number of hours. So that was another key factor. Easily the job availability in US was again, initially they used to think that, you know, you can work in gas stations and you can basically run your own show. So to be very honest, that was another factor which was there. But now they are eyeing that I want to complete my flying as fast as possible. So if you are going for a CPL, if somebody promised me that, okay, you have your theory papers ready, you can complete your flying in 6 months or maybe in a year or so, I'm available in a market in a year. So that is another factor which was there, why people are going abroad. Availability of aircraft, availability of instructors. You have added benefit that you can work some part-time and, you know, add to the cost, which was again another factor to be considered.
So while Captain Arpit, we are at this point of training, going to US and doing it here. Let's say we're doing it here in India, and seems, because it naturally seems to be the better of the two in terms of cost and time both. I understand that training can be done in two ways. I could go to a private club and get trained, or I could go to an airline also get trained there. What's the basic difference between these two types of, I mean, are they miles apart? Is it the same thing? Or you train here for an aircraft, here you're training generally? I mean, what is it all about?
Not really. See, I would say getting trained in any flying school is equally good as trained by any airline. So airline we have like SpiceJet, Indigo, and number of airlines across the globe, they have this cadet program. So what they do is that they invite applications after 12th science, and after induction program, their preliminary exams, they select pilots, wanted to be pilot, and they train them from zero, as per their standards. So basically they are eyeing, but that is, it's very costly. So I would say if you are getting that CPL done in 35 to 50 lakh, including the type rating. So here I want to touch this topic also. So for example, you get CPL, which you get on basic aircraft. Now you want to join any airline, you are not going to fly that training aircraft. You're going to fly Boeing or even Airbus or ETR or Q400 Bombardier. So those aircraft needs to be endorsed on your license. So that is extra cost which is involved along with your CPL cost. So what airline does it, they give you the entire package in 1 CR plus, and they will charge so much of money, saying that, okay, once you are inducted, at least after 1.5, 2.5 years, your job is guaranteed. So that is another added factor which you kind of, encashing that way. So that amount of money increases. But if you ask me, yes, it is quality-wise, it does not matter. Now we have equal good quality in flying school as well as, because they are also infrastructure. Airline need not stay here and they make you fly in India. They send you Australia, or there are different countries they have chosen depending upon the contracts they have. So quality is not a problem, even in flying school.
And which means that basically whether we do go to a private school or to an airline, end of the day we are assured that we are safe in the sky. Whichever person finally ends up flying, they have been trained enough to know their job pretty well.
So, Alpesh, I would say, the good training institute reduced the training hours in airline. Airline, they have their own training structure and standards. Once you pass out from any flying school, you have a kind of, months of training before you get released as a first officers. So they have exhausted training standards as well. You go via different levels and number of exams before you get released as a first officer. But yes, I would say any good flying school or flying institute make airline job easier, because to blend in will become very easier if you are already trained to their standards.
Fair enough. And what I also understood, and this for the audience as well to probably take home something, is that while in a car, I just need one license and then I'm good to drive any car. But what you're trying to tell me here is that I want to drive a BMW, you probably need a different license or endorsement on your license saying that you're qualified to drive a BMW because you learned on probably a Toyota, but that doesn't matter. Now you're going to fly a BMW, so please get yourself endorsed for it as well.
So yes, that is so true. And it is not that, a week's job. It is like if I'm flying a Cessna 152 or 172 as a trainee, and when I join any airline and I want to fly a Q400 or ATR or a Boeing or Airbus, I have to go months of the training and I have to get endorsed that license, on my license that aircrafts to be endorsed. Now if I have done my rating on Boeing 737, and if I want to join Indigo, then that will be a little, because now the entire technology, that entire training, it will help me as an aviator, that okay, I have flown Boeing, but when you talk about technology, then you are again zero. You have to start from scratch, for that matter even for Q100 or any other aircraft.
So basically each aircraft has a different setting or setup of operating it. While you may understand the basics, it's always nice to get into the depth of running each instrument each way and then hence get it endorsed. In doing all of this, do the pilots' mental health be a concern, and how do you take care of this? And this is an open question for all of you, especially two of you, since I understand that we've kept hearing over the past few years where mental health issues have caused a few disasters across the globe. And how do you take care of that as far as training is concerned?
This mental health is not only for pilots, basically all aviator and all industries. But when we talk about aviation, it's immediately or directly dealing with lives. So whether it's technical staff who is like maintaining your aircraft to the pilot who is flying that aircraft. The cockpit environment is very stressful. So there are two stages where you are initially, when you are taking off or when you are landing. Those are the phases where you required your maximum concentration. Having said that, crews and other part are equally important, but here the stress level is extremely high. Now, plus the job requires uneven timing. So tomorrow you are getting up at 5 o'clock, maybe the next day you are coming back home at 5 o'clock. Now, if you are not able to maintain this, your lifestyle in a way that you reduce your fatigue by maintaining your sleeping cycle or maintaining your sleeping hours, that is adversely affecting your mental health. You may be physically and mentally absolutely fit. That does not mean that the sleepless nights will not affect you. And this is right now addressed across the globe by ICAO also, that fatigue is the major contribution factor when we are talking about pilot errors contributing to the incident or accident. Captain Ajay.
Well, Arpit has covered most of the things, but what I would like to add here is, like, each person has a different physical, bearing, and it cannot be defined differently when you are going to do a task which is common. So what has happened, there are guidelines which has been done on an average basis, that a person can only do 8 hours of duties, let's say. Now a pilot can only fly for 8 hours. He is allowed only to fly 8 hours. He is only allowed to do 10 hours of duty in a day. But that 8 hours is also quite a long, means maybe he could fly, maybe I could not fly, 8 hours. When I am flying an aircraft 2 hours a day, and then one day suddenly put me on 8 hours, it'll be like, sitting here, and listening to all of us, You get little bored in that environment. So that has been made as a guideline by DGCA, in which, we all have to follow those duty line, and, everybody's body is covered in that. So that way, fatigue is a very big challenge which is being addressed by the regulators.
Which means that, one, obviously your license needs regular updation or needs to be checked, or your physical ability to fly, so your physical checks or your reports or your blood markers have to be within certain parameters, I assume, to do that. But you also said something very interesting which I just picked up. Duty hours and flying hours, just for the advantage of the audience, could you define both for us? Meaning, you said 10 hours of duty hours, but then you all of a sudden said 8 hours of flying hours. So what's the difference? Is it door-to-door something? What's it all about?
See, the regulator, after doing a lot of studies, have come out with a cycle period of working, in which they have a duty hour and flying hours, let us say. So when an airline pilot has to fly, let us say if he's going to fly from here to London, so if he's going to fly 8 hours, after that in a London flight is 10 hours. So he can only be in the cockpit for 8 hours. Whereas duty time is when he leaves his house, he's leaving from his house and he comes to the aircraft. So we give them about 45 minutes is duty. The duty time starts from there. So 45 minutes from there, then whatever time he spends in the office till he sits in the cockpit. In cockpit he can only do 8 hours, but it cannot go beyond those 10 hours. If he's done, let us say, 3 hours after leaving from the house, now he can only spend 7 hours in the cockpit. So that kind of thing, so that is the...
So that's what it's seen, that there is always, that's why we have this extra pilot on our long haul flights. You see rest areas for pilots, so there are...
No, if you go to US or even in India, there will be pilot coming from Chennai to fly an aircraft from Ahmedabad. Now when he's coming from Chennai, he's actually on duty. So if his flight is delayed there, he comes here, he cannot actually take you as a passenger. He will become a passenger himself because he cannot fly after that. So it's a lot of big challenge,
So I think that's for all of us to take, when at times when we have delayed flights and then we are fighting with the airport staff and saying, pilot to દેખાય છે પણ તમે કેમ ઉડાવતા નથી? They say, ના ના પણ આમને નથી ઉડાવવાનું, બીજા પાયલટ આવી રહ્યા છે દિલ્હીથી અત્યારે. So I think that's what you're referring to, where they have actually finished their duty hours, so they can't basically sit in the flight and take it up, though they are qualified, but by law they are not supposed to.
Exactly.
And having said that, just digressing a little bit from this flying, Rajiv bhai, we keep hearing about, you running a charter flight services, you mentioned that the 3 verticals that you do at Blue Rain, one of them is where there are planes available to be chartered. So how does that business look in India overall? Are people more interested in this methodology of non-scheduled flights or chartering a plane? And and what are the business opportunities in this field?
In India, charter business earlier was very low, but in the last 2 years, it has gone up substantially. People load it a lot that during COVID times, people did charter business because they would not want to fly a commercial. I personally think partly true, but it is the economy that is doing good. The regulations of DGCA have become easier for getting aircrafts, etc. Simple thing, in Ahmedabad, 5 years ago, there were 3 or 4 planes available for charter. Now there are more than 10, around 10 to 15 aircrafts that are available for charter. Now, COVID has not contributed to that. It's the availability of the aircraft. It's all the chicken or the egg. You have the first, you have the aircraft, and then you have people fly, or you have people fly and then the aircraft. So somewhere it has to balance out, and it is going in that direction where, at times there are now more people wanting to do, and now there are more aircrafts coming. Therefore, there are more people in it. So it is a growing trend, no doubt, and it is going to grow extremely fast. And the charter business in India is going to grow exponentially, even more than what the civil aviation growth is growing at this point of time, because the number of aircrafts are very less in the country. With the increasing in a number of aircrafts, the cost of managing each hour of flying is also going to go down. Efficiencies are going to increase. So all this, I would say, is headed towards a massive growth in helicopter as well as fixed wing charter services, and it's going to stay.
So, as you mentioned that there are more number of aircrafts which are now there, from just a mere 4, 5 to a dozen odd which are available for chartered services. Captain Ajay, tell us, how does your company help in, because you are the one pivotal point for a lot of these activities to happen. So what role does your company play in helping these procurement of aircrafts is my first question. And in the same breath, I would also want to know is that how do you plan to manage this non-scheduled flying operation? So where do you see that happening, or what sort of things, challenges or opportunities you see in the same field?
First question was regarding the procurement of aircraft. The procurement of aircraft, there are various categories. I won't go in deep, but it is an individual who needs to decide what kind of aircraft he wants to buy. And then he finds out there are few procedures which he has to follow, and there are consultants who can help and, get an aircraft. So procurement of aircraft is not a very difficult task, but to manage it, to run it is more challenging. And like what Rajiv ji said, that, it is a chicken and egg story. But I don't know if you know which one came first. Do you know which one came first, chicken or the egg? The chicken came first. So we are the ones who are building up chicken here. So our job is to build up infrastructure. If we don't have airports, there will be no aircraft. There will be no pilot, there will be no engineer. So our company is actually building infrastructure. We are going to build about 11 to 12 new airstrips in Gujarat, which will actually cater for all these private players to reach their destinations. Last mile connectivity, we have about 208 helipads which are available. So people with helicopter can reach the remotest of place in our state. So that is the task what we are doing.
And you think this is sustainable enough as well? You're bullish about what's happening right now, and you're sure that the chicken needs to be there because the egg is going to be there to follow.
We have got the chicken, and I know the business people will bring the egg here to the state. But yes, this is going to be sustainable because it is a thought for future. When I came here, in 2004 when I joined, there was no state government airfield. There was not even one. And today we are looking at, about 13 to 14 state government airstrips. And these are all going to be sustainable because the amount of the expansion which is going to happen, there is no parking available. Aircraft cannot be parked like cars. They require a proper bay, they require a proper in and out movement. So there is going to be a lot of shortage of parking, and that will be catered by these airstrips. And moment, there's one aircraft, the airstrip gets activated. So it is.
So, Captain Ajay, that also brings us to a point, a thought process, and that's where the safety in this aviation industry is so much of a prime concern, because with growth we do not wish ever anybody to have issues with safety issues. You don't want to undervalue your abilities to achieve something. So what changes do you think would be necessary as far as the aviation industry is concerned? What sort of things will need to be adapted or changed? Also, while Captain Arpit has been very strongly advocating trainings which are to the highest of standards, over the last few years we've seen a lot of aircrafts running into troubled waters. One as late as yesterday, where we saw a SpiceJet flight in Hyderabad having smoke in flight and had to do an emergency landing. Now, because perhaps the media has become more stronger and it comes out to us in that form, or perhaps we hear stories about even a PPL student flying across country and having to land in a field because she forgot that there was not enough fuel in her aircraft and had to do an emergency landing somewhere. So somewhere or other, the training was amiss as a common man, as we see that. And how do you see that being taken care?
See, with regards to safety, aviation is the most safest environment which exists actually. If you see, it is so well regulated that, means even if there is no regulator, like if you, let us say, if you go to a parking lot, if there is no guy there, you won't park car properly. But here, without a regulator, nobody is seeing this. The training, the environment is so well governed that, people actually follow the rules. And like what you said, to err is human, means you will end up making some errors. The best of pilots, they get fatigued. They know they'll get fatigued, but they still take that challenge and do it. A lot of pilots I know have ran out of fuel at very last minute because their calculation has gone wrong. Because, a lot of time you have to do mental debt reckoning, what we call in flight. You say you're going to go to Jaipur and the weather is going bad now. He sees his fuel and he says, no, you have to divert to Lucknow. And he has already planned to divert to Lucknow, but sometimes you forget to calculate that you got headwinds. You consumed more fuel, or you had more passenger or load put in the aircraft than you thought at last minute. So these are small things which will keep happening, but it is so well done that chances of having those are very minimum. So it is a very safe environment, and very well planned.
That's great to know, and that builds in our confidence that we would, even in case of emergency, we would be taken care of by the pilot who is in command of the flight. But I also know that you head the emergency response team as far as this part of the country is concerned. And what sort of things you have in place in case, God forbid, but if we had to have any emergency, how well equipped is the state to respond to a situation and be there at the quickest possible time?
So, as far as the emergency is concerned, means the state doesn't have much role to play. It is actually done by Airport Authority of India. Each airport has their own setup of, medical emergency, the fire emergencies, or all the other critical emergencies. But then the emergency response are of various kind, means let us say one is emergency of an aircraft which actually meets with an mishap on the runway or in the flight. There is another kind of emergency which happens if there is an hijack. There is an emergency which could happen due to some kind of medical emergency on the flight. So the state government actually is part of the hijack plan or some kind of, hijack team or terrorist group which comes. So our response is only to that. So we have a committee which is in place, in case of something happens, if there is an aircraft hijack, immediately meeting takes place at the airport, and the decisions have to be taken by the committees, and it is headed by a very senior officer.
And people are well trained to know how to respond to a situation.
Yes, and they have regular meetings, and they have trials also, and they keep doing their trainings also.
Well, that's great. So what we understand or take away from here is that while in case of an emergency on flight, any distress call happening, it's the airline which is going to now talk to the air traffic controller and see how best it can be resolved. But in case of anything which is pertaining to something which is beyond an airline's
level or something.
Yeah, a national level security concern, that's where your team comes immediately.
Each state has its own center. So if it is happen, let us say if the aircraft is going to be diverted to Ahmedabad, so it will be Gujarat state. If it is going to, let us say, Bombay, so it will be Maharashtra state. So they have their that kind of high check cell and also.
Could you also tell us about what sort of plans does government of Gujarat have? I mean, how are we looking at this aviation sector, and how do you see that this is going to move forward? What sort of a vision do you carry?
So from the state's perspective, means I would divide the aviation segment development into, let us say, 4 or 5 phases. First is the infrastructure. So we are focusing very largely on building infrastructure, because if we don't build it today, we are already late. Like, means like colleagues have been telling that, means if you go to US, the number of aircrafts are so much. It is because they have so many airports also. We have not talked about how many airports does America have as compared to our airports. I don't even know the figure right now, but it might be, let us say, thousands of airports there, and we are talking about 100 now. So we stand there. So we are focusing on building this infrastructure, because in future land will not be available. Land is becoming a big constraint. No airports can be expanded. We just shifted one airport from Rajkot to Hirasar. That has taken such a huge cost, and it was very difficult. And we are wanting to, the other airports which are smaller, to build them up. It is not possible. We do understand in future the aircraft's capability will increase. They might be able to land on smaller runways. So that is why we are now developing a lot of airports. We are developing 6 new heliports in the state. We are going to come up with a vertiport in Ahmedabad. Our aim and vision is that, in future, when the traffic constraint increases on the city, the stress on the environment where things have to be moved very fast, the infrastructure should be available. So we'll be coming out of like 4 heliports, 1 vertiport in Ahmedabad. We are going to develop some skill institutes, because without skilled manpower, this environment will not there. We are also working on cargo policy. We are working on, helicopter route specific, awareness of aviation, some education programs. So all those things are in pipeline.
Do we have any path-breaking initiatives as far as infrastructure, the new infrastructure is concerned? Because as you rightly said, we're too behind in time compared to the world. The world has, as far as aviation sector is concerned, has been much ahead of us at this point in time. But while we now initiate this, what sort of a vision does the government of Gujarat carry, and what sort of path-breaking initiatives you're trying to take here in developing these new things that you're doing?
See, the path-breaking initiative here is that, the airports which are coming up are in private category. Most of the airports, run into problems because they are built on public category airports. Public category airport requires a lot of clearances, and those clearances are difficult. Like if you see new Bombay airport, which was to come up, has taken ages, because there are clearances which are required, environment clearances and other things. Private airport do not require that. Once the private airport reaches the potential of public airport, then we can work on that. But just by bringing a public airport or thinking of public airport and stop the activity is gone. So this is one of the initiatives which we have taken, that we'll come up with private airports. So it will be developed in 2 years, 3 years, we'll have airports coming up. Otherwise they won't come. And once they are there, and the other is, we are working on vertiports. Vertiport is a new concept. We are working on that. We have started air ambulance, which is the first state in Gujarat, is the first state to do that, air ambulance service by the state, all those kind of things are there.
So what is a vertiport?
See, vertiport is a new concept, which is, earlier it used to be a helicopters only. Now we have lot of flying machines which are coming, which are more efficient than helicopters. So these are like flying cars, the drones, or you can say eVTOL aircrafts, electrically driven aircrafts and other things. These aircrafts do not need to go to the airport, they can be handled from a subsidiary, which is very small. So that where there is a multiple different kind of aircrafts which are vertical taking off, it could be helicopter, it could be drone, in some location, it is called a vertiport. So we are building first vertiport in country in Ahmedabad.
Coming to Rajiv, because I heard you saying a little while back that you also have training for drones. It's not just, so unmanned thing is also what happens at Blue Ray Aviation. Could you share very briefly a little bit about it as well? So what is in it? Because now drones have become so common to all of us. We keep hearing stories about that the next McDonald's burger is going to be delivered through a drone to you.
Yes, hopefully. Let's. I hope it comes warm and with the packaging. So, drone training has caught up in India, and what normally people look at drone is what we see in marriages and photographs, etc. But drone is much, much beyond that, and now everybody is more exposed to it. One of the biggest things in India which drone is doing today is there are two things. One is spraying the insecticides in the agricultural land. India has got a very vast agricultural land. And two is laying the transmission lines and doing the surveys and all. Earlier there used to be aircrafts flying all across. So we have started a basic drone training facility where we give the basic training. Government of India has yet to come up with other modules of more defined training beyond just the basic training. So as time goes by, we will even try to adopt ourselves with those modules and take the training further. And drone training is now today centralized. I mean, there is a government policy, whether you go to a drone, whether it's our school, or any other school in the country, in Delhi, anywhere, there is a syllabus. It's again guided by DGCA. So we ultimately give a drone training certificate, which he has the basic training. Then on that, it's like you become a pilot, a general pilot, and then you have to train yourself with every aircraft. Likewise, in drone training also, this is going to come up.
That's wonderful. Before I open the floor to the audience, I have one open question for all three of you. And that's, what does safety mean to you as far as operational safety? Tell us define it for us each individually. What does operational safety mean for you? Because end of the day, for all of us who are going to be on any of these aircraft or receiving any of these services, for us the most important point would be that we are in safe hands. Whether it's a warm burger that comes to us, or whether we risk our lives or send our goods and cargoes through the quickest means of transportation, or in case of a flying ambulance where one of our loved ones might need that help. And we would want to know from you, what does this safety mean to you as far as operationally it is concerned, and what does your company do to see to it that this is taken care of?
So, as we say in airline or any even that applies to flying school as well, safety is everyone's business. And now if we talk that how relevant and important, so basically that's a foundation of any organization or any flying school. We as an airline, we have a safety management system which is applicable to all the department. Right from the guy who is moving cargo, putting your bags into the cargo hold, to the highest, as a pilot we fly. So right in the bottom of the chain to the highest in the chain, there is a proper training given to each and every individual. There are exams been taken, there are courses which been given, like for example for pilots, we have exams every 6 months. There are certain courses we have to complete within 6 months, within a year. Every department has to renew their licenses, renew their courses. So there is a separate department for, as in the whole safety of an airline. There is further to that, there is a safety department which takes care of flight operation safety. And it is a very open and non-punitive, they have kept it non-punitive. So as in anybody can report to the authority whatever they are observing. There are anonymous reports are there, voluntary reports are there. There is a proper committees are there in airline where you can approach them. There are various forms are there for each and every details. For example, if there is a bird strike, if there are some foreign objects you observed around aircraft, there is a safety as an airline in terms of security, and also that is also involved. So there are so many things which works behind the curtain to make sure that whatever the aircraft flies, it's absolutely safe. So I would say safety is the topmost and
most paramount thing. Would anybody want to add anything to it, or?
So with regards to safety, he has covered everything, but what I would like to tell, means everybody here, what is safety as far as aviation is concerned. It might be with the railways also, it might be with the transport industry also, but the aviation being very unforgiving, it is very important. So what is there is the discipline. The aviation professional you see everywhere around you, when you see him in uniform, you see him driving a bus, you see him, they are very disciplined force. And this discipline has been put them by virtue, you know, by the changing their attitude, you know, by keeping a constant eye on them, seeing them, they don't make a mistake. And they do those things rightly every day and every time. It is, you know, it is a self-discipline which has now imbibed in their own culture. It is like that, you know, you get up in the morning and you go for walk every day. You know, you will have to go, you know. For us, we may say one day we might not go, no, today I'm tired. There it won't happen. So that is the safety concept for the aviation.
So one more thing. So just to put it on record, you know, in airline, each and every flight is 100% monitored. So like, let's say if any flight, let's say in a day we have 1,700 flights, all 1,700 flights are monitored and they have been diagnosed. There is a team who dedicated 24/7. There are certain software which are purchased by the company, and every flight is scrutinized where slightest deviation is monitored and brought to the notice of a pilot or concerned technicians or so. The best part is I have my own dashboard. So if I go to that dashboard, I can see if at all, because being a training or check pilot, I have to, there are certain times the other person misses something. So slightest deviation also monitored, and I can basically check myself that, okay, this is what in last month, now I have to be careful. And as Captain Ajay said, the best part is self-discipline. So that is never compromised, basically.
Thank you. That really builds up the confidence being airborne at any point in time, that there's always somebody checking on it in case of any error. I'd like to open up the floor to the audience. If anybody has any questions, yes, sir. I'll just pass on the mic to you, sir.
Thank you. I have questions on 4 areas which I consider gray. They are all relating to aviation industry and the emerging opportunities. Number one is the opportunities in the drone implementation, because recently even Gujarat government has come out with a drone policy. Likewise, it's there in the entire country. And as Raju bhai rightly said, the drone has got a lot of applications. It's not just like somebody flying from one place to another place. It could be border monitoring, and because we see Pakistan sending 119 drones in such a short span of time, and we could catch or knock down only 1 or 2. And what are we doing? So the question is, to become a drone pilot, what does one need to do so that we can guide our new generation? What is the training all about? How long does it take? How much does it cost? Because I know that, to become a student pilot license to get a CPL or PPL and all that is prohibitively expensive. Is it equally expensive to become a drone pilot? This is one area. Let me finish quickly, then you can touch upon depending on availability of the time. Second is, when we talk about emerging opportunity, what is the future of air taxis services in India? Because I spend major part of my year in Mumbai, because I have a house there as well. So I see people taking, or rather wasting a lot of time, after landing at the airport and then going to their actual place. And I also have a very bad experience. Whenever I had been to Bangalore, I took almost 3 hours, reaching the place of meeting from the airport itself. Same is the case in Hyderabad and Delhi, and you know it very well. So air taxi, where are we now? Where will be 5 years down the line? This is the second area of the concern I have. Third one is the seaplane. There are so many opportunities, but we have a very bad example of seaplane in Ahmedabad. It was started with a great fanfare. It actually sounded very, very optimistic and very futuristic, and people loved it, but it had to be, discontinued. But there are opportunities, we all know. Tourism people are, mad about, crazy about it, but there is a problem there. The fourth area is when we talk about emerging opportunities. Being Gujaratis, we all are interested in knowing where to invest. And aviation industry is considered to be the most riskiest industry if you ask any person engaged with share market. So this is an area if you can quickly touch upon. So I'm
Sure,
sorry I'm putting a lot of
good,
questions.
all good questions. I think we did touch upon a few of them, like Captain Ajay mentioned about making of the airport where multiple different types of aircrafts could be used. So that's what I think, but I will ask him only to answer that more in detail. And Rajiv Bhai can tell us about obviously the drone, because that's what's the new up in there and how it would be taken forward. So I'll leave it open to all three of you to please address to sir's satisfaction.
Drone training right now in India is at a very basic level. Drone licenses are given to people who take a training for around 5 or 7 days, which includes ground classes. The approximate fees for a 5 or a 7 day course is around 50,000 rupees. That is the basic. After that, the student gets a certificate, and then they have to apply for other drone courses, and the government of India is yet formulating those courses, and in days to come those courses will be formulated and will be taken further. To answer the last, that airline business is a risky business, I would like to just get into that risk in terms, so we are not talking about safety and all, we are talking about the financial
risk.
Yes. In a way, what happens whenever one buys a car or one buys a sort of a airplane as against buying a house, where house your value appreciates, while in an machine, in an that asset, there is always a depreciation. It doesn't appreciate. So you have to make the most out of that machine before it depreciates and before you have to buy another machine. So that's the whole basis of it. I personally feel aviation business, if run properly, it is remunerative, profit making for people not only in the business, for people around it, and it has to be done in a structured manner. Aviation, if taken, now people say Kingfisher failed, but I mean Kingfisher took it to another end of glamour, while Indigo today is extremely disciplined in terms of finances. Yes, they have gone through bad patches. Even during COVID, our services were bad, but then it is a cycle. We all have come out of it, and I personally feel that aviation business is there profitable. And last but not the least, the late Mr. Rakesh Junjunwala, he is called a very strong proponent of the stock market. He must have seen something in it to invest in Akasa. So that's my answer.
Thank you. I think
just
discipline.
adding to that, how do you see government, instructing SpiceJet to, either ground many of their aircrafts because of frequent...
Now that is a safety issue. That is nothing to do with the financial health. Grounding because of safety is different from risky in business.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
I think it's a multiple spoke industry. There are so many moving parts in this industry, and if discipline is the key word, if taken care, I think results are seen where airlines have profited, and there are airlines which have been profiting over the years. But whenever, like Kingfisher, what Rajiv mentioned, whenever there's an indiscipline in business, because the stakes are too high, I think the losses also are multifolded and the profits are also multifolded. But we'll have both Captain Arpit and Captain Ajay sharing about other point of your question as well.
Please.
So you had two other aspects. One was air taxi and one was seaplane.
Seaplane.
Both are similar in nature when it comes to per seat cost, and everything revolves around either you're going to make money or you're not going to make money. Nobody is going to come in business without making a money.
But I think the difference is the seaplane so far is only, owned and operated by the government. Whereas, we keep hearing about Ola and Uber starting air taxi service from airport to city. Is that true?
No. So what I'll say, see, the air taxi service, like Captain Arpit was saying, it has started in Bangalore.
Yeah.
Air taxi, it was operating earlier. Now there is a company called Blade. It has started air taxi service. Air taxi services will work only in places which in which there is traffic congestion.
True.
So, and there is an availability of helipad for helicopters to operate. Drones and, flying cars are not that yet in what they will take time to come. It is only helicopters, and helicopters are very expensive.
True.
The per seat cost in a helicopter, for an 1 hour flight, if I might not be wrong, would be about 7,000 to 8,000 rupees.
True.
So if the sector is small, Blade is a company in Bangalore doing a trip from city to airport at 3,250 rupees.
Correct.
And that is working very fine. Because in Bangalore airport is too far and traffic is 3 hours. So people are willing to pay that. But if you run the same service in Ahmedabad, from riverfront to, so nobody is going to take it. So it depends. So, but air taxi is working. As far as the Seaplane is concerned, Seaplane was an initiative by the government of India which came up here, and Ahmedabad was chosen because we had the riverfront, we had Statue of Unity. The per seat cost on a seaplane is about 18,000 rupees, which is very expensive. If we ask somebody to pay 18,000 rupees from here to Kevadia, people are not going to pay. So this was a scheme which was initiated by the government. Till our economy improves, our GDP comes to a level where we can afford, because in foreign seaplanes are working, you'll say why it can work there, because they can afford to pay that amount. If you go to US, you'll pay $300 for a 20 minutes flight, but in India you will not pay that. So till we reach there, state government, central government is making some kinds of plan under Udan scheme, in which we subsidize seats and we bring out this. So seaplane, we probably under that scheme we will see very shortly.
Thank you, Captain Ajay. We have only time for, sorry, you want to add something?
So just want to, I don't want to sound diplomatic, but what I want to tell you is that, may it be an air taxi, a drone, or a seaplane, don't see it as a failure. Trust me, looking at the global scenario, look at the way that at least our government started all those things. Down the line, 5 years maybe, you will see it were running fantastic. Any country must have started once, but eventually they got succeeded. We started, and maybe a couple of years you will see there are so many seaplanes going on, drone going on. Right now we are in a primitive stage of all these segments. Air taxi definitely started in Bangalore. There were helicopter services provided from city to the airport. But as Captain Ajay said, per seat cost is very high. The reason being there are infrastructure development. So we are in a process of making chickens. We are waiting for the eggs to hatch.
But see, most of us...
Sorry, before I take... we'll have to give opportunity to someone else because we've already asked 5-6 questions. We have a gentleman up there. Sir, if you could please ask. But before you ask a question, all of you have a feedback form with you, because this is probably the last question that we'll be able to take. While we take Sir's question and answer it, a request to all of you kindly to fill up this feedback form, so that will help us at AMA to come back with better and more engaging programs, open forums for all of you. Sir, we'll pass on the mic to you to take the last question up there.
This question is specifically for Rajiv ji. As you stated, the training of a drone pilot is around 50,000 rupees. You also stated earlier that there are opportunities in pesticide spraying or transmission line surveying. Do you visualize anything more specific? Because the 50,000 trained, 50,000 rupees paid and trained drone pilot, he may not be able to earn that money from these marriage receptions, etc. What is your vision that the drones will be able to do and will do after a few years?
Drones would be able to do many things apart from even transferring people. So we would have an unmanned aircraft, but that's again, let's leave that. Like I said, transmission line, I mentioned about agriculture spraying. Even if India does 20% of its agricultural land through drone spraying, that in itself could change the landscape for the agriculturalist as well as for the drone person who is doing it. Yes, air survey, transmission line. Another thing, we ourselves did a survey once from one hospital to the other hospital. If a drone can transport an organ, I mean, there is, for example, an organ in hospital A required in hospital B, we could transfer that organ even, it would beat all the traffic and it would reach very fast. So not getting into more details, but these are immense opportunities, and I'm sure as the drone industry progresses, there will be new and new ideas that will come in, like Ola, Uber, we didn't even know about it, that there could have been such a model, and then there is such a model. So I think in days to come, there in itself will be more opportunities.
Thank you, Rajiv bhai. I think the word here to take back for all of us is the one which is written right behind me, and that's emerging. It's still emerging, it's in the line, an aviation industry which is now at a threshold where it has lots of emerging opportunities in lot of its different arms and tentacles that it has spread. Thanks to Captain Ajay, who runs a company which helps us in doing that chicken part, the infrastructure, so that there would be these opportunities in tons coming in for people to grab them, because Gujarat is a state which has been a front runner in this. Thank you to Captain Arpit, because people like him who are in the fraternity with Indigo as a training pilot and similar with other airlines are the ones who see to it that the breed that emerges out is not one which is just being given out. We have IIM and IIT graduates which come out from here just as a comparison, and it's not from any local institute that emerged, that there could be concerns about the knowledge they possess once they are in the field on the pressure job to operate a machine, to see to it that things happen. And thank you to Rajiv bhai, because unless and until we'll not have entrepreneurs like him to come up and set up such private institutes, such private clubs for people to take up this as a hobby, as a sport, as a genuinely a learning way where they may not afford to get into a high-end institute for learning, or may not have the seat even if they had the money to do it, could come to a club and learn the same skills and then probably go back to an airline and still find a place for themselves over there. So yes, genuinely this aviation industry is emerging and has lot of things for us in hold, but most importantly, let's all be happy and go back home with one thought, that we are going to be safe in whatever happens from this point onwards. Thank you all of you for being here tonight and being such patient and intelligent listeners, and thank you once again to the panel out here. We really appreciate your time given to us. Thank you, everyone. I would also request you all please to fill up the feedback form, because this will genuinely help us to perform better at AMA. I have a small token of appreciation for the three panelists here. Can we please wish them with a big round of applause?